people like me. You need people like me so you can point your fucking fingers and say, that's the bad guy. That's the bad guy. That's the bad guy. That's the bad guy. That's the bad guy.
Joshua versus Franklin. Let's talk about the fight. Not a particularly ambitious performance from the former unified champion Anthony Joshua. Not particularly impressive, albeit efficient.
I had the guy winning the fight 10 rounds to 2 to 11 rounds to 1.
The fight itself, round by round, was practically a shutout, but there is still a lot of boo birds out there and a lot of harsh critics who are demanding more from Anthony, the two-time former heavyweight champion.
Saw a very good jab from Anthony Joshua.
Good jab, good defense, good movement.
Didn't get hit with very many punches that he didn't need to get hit with. He really didn't get hit with very many punches at all.
Managed the distance well against Jermaine Franklin, the smaller fighter, smaller in stature, who struggled to get mid-range to inside to get off punches. Him being the shorter fighter, he would have had to because he couldn't fight this fight from the outside, but Anthony Joshua did, touching him with jabs, getting in with right hands.
At least 2 really good uppercuts, at least 2 that I saw.
Seems to me that it was Anthony Joshua and Derek James's intention to keep this a boxing match.
And not a shootout.
While he implements what he worked on in the gym with his new trainer, his new corner, Derek James, it seems to me that they wanted to pace themselves for this fight. One thing I noticed is that
he never got tired.
Bear in mind that Anthony Joshua weighed in a career heaviest, somewhere around 250, 252 pounds. But in the fight, you notice that he paced himself and he never gassed out. He never got tired.
It's an improvement.
Previous instances, Anthony has been accused of not having the best gas tank. After 6 or 7 rounds, you'll see the guy fading a little bit, breathing with his mouth open. That didn't happen here. He was in control the vast majority of the fight.
Yeah.
Never got tired, never showed any signs of getting tired.
But Jermaine Franklin did.
A tale of two halves. Anthony Joshua landed a lot of jabs, a lot of glancing right hands, not heavy ones, not right hands that he was fully stepping into and committing to, but were getting through. And Jermaine Franklin, he's stubborn. He showed a good chin. It's not that the guy wasn't getting hit.
He was getting hit. He just wasn't discouraged.
Where expectation meets reality. That many were expecting Anthony to go in there and stop this guy. I was as well, and that he didn't.
That's what's motivating most of the criticism, that Anthony, being so much bigger, so much more experienced than Jermaine Franklin, there were a lot of people out there who were expecting more. They were expecting a knockout, a dramatic one.
I saw many of those criticisms, that Anthony still seems gun-shy, still seems a bit timid. Interpreting the performance perhaps requires more consideration than those individuals are willing to provide.
You'd be hard-pressed to find somebody who's willing to call it down the middle in this sport and give an even assessment of a performance.
Really is seldom seen, though. On the scale of 1 to 10, I'd have to give Anthony 7, maybe a 7.5 out of 10.
Not the most ambitious performance, not the most dramatic.
Though still very efficient and effective. This is a fight that never got away from him, a fight where he was never in trouble. In fact, he had the guy in trouble for a brief moment when he went to his body in the second half of the fight. You saw Jermaine Franklin wince.
He was hurt.
Albeit very briefly. I guess the indictment there is that Anthony hurt the guy, noticeably hurt the guy, but didn't finish him.
Didn't show enough dog for the critics.
Solid. Defense was good. Not enough offense. When he did, it was good. Thought Jermaine Franklin's got a great chin. It was a tough start for him. I think he went into his shell and tried to survive in the back end of the fight, Jermaine, to be honest. I think AJ lacked a little bit of confidence. His jab was good early. Didn't throw enough combinations. Didn't work hard enough on the inside. But it's his third trainer in 3 fights. You know, we've got to get some kind of momentum going with that trainer. And he did 12 rounds at a canter. You know, one thing he always questions himself, I think, is his tank as well. And a solid win. solid, not spectacular.
Now, perhaps Anthony Joshua could have racked up a highlight reel knockout if Jermaine Franklin didn't spend the back end of the fight spoiling. After a while, he stopped punching and started clinching.
Not dissimilar from what we saw from Caleb Plant in the David Benavidez fight a little over a week ago.
Got to the point to where Jermaine Franklin is just marching forward looking to close the distance, but once he's there, all he can do is tie the guy up. I figure exhaustion must have caught up to Jermaine Franklin, the damage from the jabs that he took, a few right hands.
It started to set in and he wasn't fighting anymore. He was just spoiling.
There is a feeling that Anthony Joshua didn't do enough to hurt the guy, really hurt the guy, step into his punches, nail him, try to get the guy out of there, that it was still a very conservative, almost timid performance from Anthony.
I have to admit, I myself was expecting a knockout inside 6 rounds, and that didn't happen.
Though to the point that Eddie Hearn raised to IFL TV, it is true that in the last 3 fights, Anthony Joshua has had 3 separate corners, 3 separate trainers. Rob McCracken in the first Usyk fight, Angel Fernandez and Robert Garcia in the second, here with Jermaine Franklin.
Got Derek James in his corner.
Consideration for that, when you've had 3 separate trainers your last 3 fights, you're not going to be fluid.
And listen, Anthony was effective. He won 10 out of 12 rounds, maybe 11 out of 12.
It's not like he got hurt in the fight. It's not like the fight got away from him. In fact, his boxing is what prevented it from turning into a fight. But whenever this guy gets out there, he's under harsh scrutiny. The lights are extra hot.
Can't do nothing right for some people.
It's what he's got to deal with in tandem with Jermaine Franklin being a very stubborn customer. Bear in mind that Jermaine Franklin, he's never been stopped.
He's durable.
I'm not wowed by Anthony Joshua's performance. In fact, I think this is further indication that looking for a big fight in his very next fight isn't a good idea, because there's still more work needs doing, and he needs to develop a sense of continuity.
Fluidity.
I've been beating that drum all week. You're not going to turn into a completely different fighter overnight off of just one fight with Derek James. Anthony Joshua needs more time, whether he wants it or not.
He needs it.
Because he's not put together. Not yet, though he could be in 1 or 2 more fights with Derek James in his corner. More time to develop that rapport and really work on things.
They need time to. The Boo Birds are going to give him a hard time the whole time he's doing this, but
that's the situation. Based off that performance, I saw subtle improvements.
Small ones.
But the critics are looking for broad strokes, dramatic ones, big right hands, really big ones, knockdowns, a knockout.
They don't just want to see Anthony get back to his winning ways. They want to see him do it in style, make a statement. Hard to say that outpointing Jermaine.
It's not a statement. Dillian White outpointed Jermaine Franklin.
They don't want to see Anthony just outpoint the guy. They want to see Anthony splatter the guy.
I myself think that some consideration should go into Jermaine just being a stubborn customer, a solid, durable fighter that's hard to get out of there. But alas,
there's a lot of critics.
All these haters, pure haters. They're haters, but it is what it is. I don't expect them to like me. I don't like them either, so fuck them all. So it is what it is, isn't it? Yeah, the fighters, I see them, trust me, I see them all. Like, there's a lot of haters out there, but they're not my friends anyway, so it is what it is.
And many of the critics criticizing Anthony Joshua's last performance, let's be honest, many of them, they're not his friends, they're not even his fans.
Those are actually Tyson Fury fans.
You're expecting an even assessment of the action from those guys? You're expecting an even assessment of the action from those people.
How's Joshua versus Franklin as a performance compare with Tyson Fury versus Otto Wallin as a performance? I'd say that Otto Wallin gave Tyson Fury more pushback than Jermaine gave Anthony.
Anthony was never cut in this fight. He was in control the vast majority of it.
I feel like other fighters are allowed certain permissions that Anthony is not.
I feel like a fighter like Tyson Fury, for example, who looked a lot more human opposite the ring Otto Wallin than Anthony did yesterday opposite the ring Jermaine Franklin, I feel they're given a level of consideration that Anthony's not given. That for some people, Anthony can't do nothing right.
And those people are entitled to their opinions. It's not that they're not. It's just that their opinions and their assessment really isn't an even assessment, now is it?
My own thoughts. Anthony Joshua's got to work on things. He needs more time with Derek James behind that performance, which was a solid performance, an efficient and effective performance, albeit one lacking wow factor. Now is not the time to go into...
Now ain't the time to chase a big fight.
Now's not the time to start talking about a Tyson Fury fight. And all week, that's what Eddie Hearn has been talking about post-fight. After yesterday's fight, that's what Anthony was talking about.
They're putting that pressure on themselves.
If you were offered Dillian White or Tyson Fury next, what would you prefer?
Well, 100% Tyson Fury. I think that Yeah, that's the pot of gold. That's the WBC heavyweight champion of the world, bro. That's what it's about. So yeah, definitely Tyson Fury.
Your son mentioned Tyson Fury. Anthony mentioned Tyson Fury. Do you think it's a fight to make next? And how does he fare after tonight's performance?
I would think Tyson Fury would look at that performance and say, I'm ready to fight him, number one. That takes a big obstacle away. He has to decide whether he wants to go for the big payday or whether he wants to build and learn for longer, in which case he needs 2 or 3 more warm-up fights.
I agree with Barry. I agree with Barry Hearn, the father of Eddie Hearn. If what he's going to do next is in the best interests of self-preservation, then now's not the time to fight Tyson Fury. The Anthony Joshua I saw yesterday is not ready for a Tyson Fury fight in his next fight. Not while he's breaking in a new trainer, not while he's caught between styles.
That's what he is. The guy's had 3 separate trainers his last 3 fights.
The boxing community at large, many of them, may not be understanding of all of that, but they don't have to be. And Anthony Joshua,
He at least should be.
he needs more time with Derek, and I can't stress this enough. He needs to be more active, because a more active fighter is a sharper fighter, a sharper, more explosive fighter. And the last couple of years, Anthony Joshua,
I think he's been fighting once a year for the last 3 years.
ending up in long, drug-out negotiations for fights that don't materialize, fights that don't happen, trying their hardest to make the big fights, the big fights.
Remember that after Pulev, they went into negotiations for a Tyson Fury fight. A long, drug-out set of negotiations that ended up falling apart at the last minute due to Wilder's mediation arbitration situation with Fury.
How much time did they spend on that? And how much time did they spend from the first Usyk fight to the second Usyk fight, getting that over the line? Now, what you want to do, now that he's back in the winner's bracket, is enter into another long, drug-out set of negotiations.
Not the right move.
Not going to make any bones about it. I would not put yesterday's Anthony Joshua in the ring with Tyson Fury.
I wouldn't.
Do you think you'll be getting on, well, one of you will be getting on to George Warren then, either about Fury or Joyce?
Yeah, I think, we'll for sure, Joyce fights in a couple of weeks anyway, doesn't he, against Silla Zhang? But for sure, I'm sure we'll speak to George Warren. I think, like we said, the conversation's already started there in the past about opportunities, and, I think it will be quite easy to set that discussion up.
You got a guy coming off of 2 consecutive losses, just gets himself back in the winner's bracket, rebounds off the loss, still breaking in a new trainer, and the matchroom people seem all too willing to re-enter talks for a fight.
Behind that performance, I would not put him in there with Tyson Fury.
And if that seems at all opportunistic to you, how opportunistic has Tyson Fury been?
He should be fighting Alexander Usyk, and he isn't.
The same Usyk that Anthony just fought 2 times consecutively. Tyson Fury should be fighting that guy, and what you're doing is giving him an out.
You're making it way too easy.
Former cruiserweight and heavyweight champion David Hay said it needs a better performance than that to jump in there with Tyson Fury. Warns AJ against Fury next and reveals who he'd like to see him fight instead.
Some of the critics are a little bit harsher than they need to be, though one thing is true. Anthony needs more time, and behind that performance, I wouldn't put him in there with Tyson Fury.
It seems all but a common sense argument to the spectators in what is this spectator sport. There are several other fights. Anthony Joshua has several options for the next 2, maybe even 3 fights.
You're putting that pressure on yourselves.
Not only was he fighting the referees, Tony Bell, you're full of shit. He's fighting the commentators. He's fighting the cameraman. They showing nothing but AJ landing good shots. The only shot AJ even had was a decent right hand, holding on with the left hook over the guy's head and throwing shitty ass right uppercuts. The referee wasn't even stopping the shit. Punching on the brakes. Like, damn, homie was fighting the referee, the cameraman, the judges. Goddamn. Goddamn. But let me tell you something. AJ, you still a bitch. If anybody knew they smelled pussy first, it was me. I knew you was pussy from day one. You was a bitch. You could fight me any day. I'm Fat Man right now. So let's just make it happen. You could talk all that shit. Dylan White, you was a bitch. You know what I'm talking about. You was a bitch of all bitches. But AJ's even a bigger bitch. A lot of y'all Brits start with a B. Y'all some bitches. I'm realizing that. Eddie Hearn, stop playing games. Stop sucking dick. Let's make this fight happen. I'm tired of all y'all shit. All y'all shit. I'm not holding them up for no more. I'm just going ham on all y'all. Every last one of y'all. I'm telling you, man. Shout out to Franklin. That's all I gotta get off my chest. AJ's a bitch, Tony Bellew's a bitch, and them referees are bitches. Straight up. Big Baby out. I'm coming for your ass.
The popular narrative has become that Anthony Joshua has lost his killer instincts. He's far too timid, and one way you can dispel many of those narratives is by putting him in the ring with Jarrell Miller. As crazy as that might sound, Jarrell Miller's criticisms of Anthony Joshua sound a lot like his critics' criticisms of Anthony Joshua. Jarrell's not focused on alphabet titles. He's not worried about Tyson Fury. He's not worried about Alexander Usyk.
Well, it's mostly because he knows who the money man in this division is, and it's not those guys.
You can trace back Anthony Joshua's downfall to the Jarrell Miller fight that didn't happen, the Jarrell Miller fight that didn't take place, that ended up leading into the Andy Ruiz fight where Anthony suffered his first professional loss. I think he could right a lot of wrongs.
I think he should fight those guys.
You heard what I said. I think Anthony Joshua should see about fighting Jarrell Miller in his next fight and running it back with Andy Ruiz for a third time. That's what I think.
Serious.
That Anthony could have the abundance of options that he has. You know, he has the option of facing an Otto Valine, which would be a common opponent between him and Tyson Fury. The chance to show Tyson Fury up while he rebuilds himself. That he could fight Otto Valine. That he could fight Filip Hrgovic for IBF mandatory status. That he could have a trilogy, a warranted trilogy, with Andy Ruiz.
Don't forget that those two guys are 1-1 with each other. Each holds a decisive victory over the other. A tiebreaker is warranted.
More so than what we got from Fury in those 3 Wilder fights. Fury won 2 of them. In the Derek Chisora trilogy, he won all 3.
There's no need for trilogies in those fights.
But Andy and Anthony, they both hold a decisive victory over each other, and that trilogy makes a bit more sense in a sporting sense than those trilogies did. And of course, Jarrell Miller, who's never at a loss for words when it comes to Anthony, perhaps the physical embodiment of all of Anthony Joshua's critics.
Incarnate.
Sounds crazy, I know. Jarrell Miller, who's effectively burned bridges at Top Rank and surely has burned bridges at Matchroom, but you tell me if they'd struggle to sell this fight.
No.
You tell me that if they made it, people wouldn't watch.
They'd watch it.
Between their backstory, their history, everything that has happened since then, and Jarrell Miller's gift of gab, his ability to trash talk, this fight would get a lot of attention.
He'd have more time to work with Derek James.
In tandem with being able to silence one of his biggest critics.
Still an unbeaten fighter. Still got a big mouth.
A lot of people would pay to see him close it. Maybe you do it over there in the United Kingdom at the O2 Arena. Or maybe you bring it here where it was supposed to go down in the United States at Madison Square Garden. You can do that.
If Tyson Fury can conjure up the ghost of Derek Chisora for a box office fight, an unnecessary trilogy late last year, you can fight this guy.
Because he's still an unbeaten fighter. He's still got a big mouth, and in many ways, you and him still have unfinished business.
You do?
Anthony Joshua needs more time with Derek James. That's what yesterday's performance communicated to me. And he'd be a fool not to utilize this opportunity. Utilize his options because he's got a lot of them.
You put him in there with Fury straight away, you must be cashing that guy out.
Anthony himself, in my opinion, would be cashing out. Going in there with Fury behind that kind of performance. If what you're doing is in the interests of longevity...
This is the second or the third phase of your career and you mean to make it last?
Can the Boy Scout act and stop putting on a brave face and start doing what's in your best interest? Because that's what Deontay Wilder and Tyson Fury have been doing with impunity for the longest time.
There's nothing wrong with Anthony Joshua taking his time.
There's nothing wrong. And he needs to build himself back up.